We live in a fantasy world now. Reality has been destroyed.
This is the time that we really need to pay attention.
The probabilities are overwhelmingly on gold's side. That is the best environment to see gold increase its value.
Welcome to Palisades Gold Radio. I'm your host, Tom Bodrovics. Joining me today is Martin Armstrong from Armstrong Economics. Martin, thanks for joining me today. How are you?
Oh, interesting. Just watching the world melt down, you know.
Unfortunately, it seems like every time you and I talk, we just seemingly come closer and closer to this idea. And it seems like we have maybe not some clarity around it, but definitely some seeming deadlines that are coming up here. So why don't we start by talking about how this 50-day ceasefire deadline imposed by Trump is kind of putting Putin in quite a difficult position here. And has this been a marked shift in Trump's attitude towards Russia, and especially towards Putin?
It certainly seems to be. I'm rather disappointed in him. I mean, what brought this about is hard to, really hard to fathom. I mean, what I do know over there is that Ukraine is about to fall. They've lost so many troops, etc., and they don't stand a prayer in hell winning. I mean, let's be real about this. This would be kind of like, you know, the Dominican Republic trying to wage war against the United States, you know. I've been hearing for at least a couple of months that NATO was looking at putting in 250,000 troops into Ukraine to prevent its ultimate collapse. Mm-hmm. Then one of the NGOs actually put it in writing. So it's getting more and more play. The theory that they've come up with now is that, all right, fine, Ukraine's not part of NATO. However, they did send in troops to Bosnia in 95, and then they sent in troops into Kosovo in 99. Mm-hmm. They weren't NATO, you know, members or anything of that nature. So they have a precedent for a third time and to just invade Ukraine. Macron's been pushing for that. And now you even have Stammer and Merz. I mean, I was on the phone both, you know, in a few countries in Europe, and I just asked a simple question because Merz was out there saying, oh, you know, there's, you know, diplomacy doesn't work. That's off the table. And I asked the question in 3 major countries, please, can you tell me which of your politicians have picked up the phone to call Putin to see if there's a diplomatic solution? Nobody could give me a name. When Trump called Putin, all of Europe was outraged. How dare he talk to him, etc. I mean, as you know, I know neocons. I've been to dinner with some of these people. Bill Kristol, whose father started, even spoke at one of our conferences. The number one rule they have in their book is do not talk to the enemy. Why? Because you might have peace. You know, simple as that. I was there in D.C. When Gorbachev made his speech and Reagan wanted to go talk to him. And so I know what was said. They couldn't say Gorbachev was still a communist. So it turned into, you can never trust a Russian. They didn't want Reagan to go speak to him. I mean, of course, if he didn't go, the Berlin Wall would never have fallen. So these people have total control of Europe. When they lost with Trump winning the election, they shifted over there. And I know some of these neocons, they set up shop in Paris and in London. And this is what's going on. It's getting pretty bad. They had, Boris Johnson had made the front pages. When there was a peace deal, he hopped on the plane, went to Ukraine, told Zelensky he wasn't allowed to have peace. But before Zelensky went to the White House, that meeting was supposed to be just a signing ceremony in Kiev. And Boris, I had good information. He flew to Ukraine 3 days in advance, instructed Zelensky to insist upon going to the White House and to embarrass Trump to try and keep the money coming for war. So I passed that information on. And that's why it kind of turned into this, it was like a food fight, I don't recall who it was, if it was Vance or Rubio. I think it was Rubio that came out afterwards and admitted that Zelensky had insisted upon coming to Washington. And you could see why they staged it that way. He was there to embarrass Trump, to try and get him, you're banning us, blah, 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 all this stuff. Give us this, you're going to, keep the money going. That's what they were after. And when that all backfired, then you have this whole thing where NATO's been pushing all Europe to increase its spending to 5%. They don't have the money. The German economy has actually already shrunk by at least 3%, maybe up to 5%. And by shrinking, I mean the number of jobs have been declining. Because at first you had the COVID, then you had the climate change, then the sanctions on Russia. So, and you've got record highs in bankruptcies in German corporations. And Germany is 25% of the European economy. It's in a bear market. Simple as that. It's going down the tubes into 2028. They don't stand a prayer in hell of coming out of this. They're too socialistic to begin with. You just had Spain come out and say you can't take more than 3,000 euros out of your personal account without permission from the government. You can't pay more than 1,000 euros in cash, even in a hotel throughout Europe. Illegal. So it's all about, hunkering down, preventing people from moving money. And any European that's watching this, you better get your money the hell out before that first bullet goes, because complete capital controls are coming. Even after World War I, they shut down all the European stock markets, so you couldn't sell anything. This is what's going on. And you have Ursula over there, who's never stood for an election, yet calls Putin a dictator, and it's wonder how they flip the definitions of these words back and forth all the time. And then she's actually unbelievably said that they can fund the war by seizing private unused assets out of your pension fund or whatever. That's going to cause a major, major panic. So it's
Marty, the last. Sorry.
I'm just amazed that we have the worst crop of world leaders I've ever seen in history at one time.
Mm-hmm. Marty, you and I spoke before, I think back in April, about capital and gold really moving before troops do. Do you think that the gold that was moved at the beginning of the year out of London is really a confirmation of that idea?
Oh yeah, I mean we have clients there, and I warned them, and they've been moving it out of Switzerland and London. Um, they moved some to Singapore, but most of it's been moved off to the United States. Um, it's the same thing. Once those capital controls come in, you're not going to get that out. This is just what they do in war. And we have to understand that. And you still have like these people thinking, oh, central banks are buying gold, they're bullish. They don't give a shit if it's going up or down. All right. What this is that China had 10% of US national debt. And then you have people like Blinken who, threatening China, oh, if you help Russia, we'll do the same thing to you. Oh, okay, thank you. You want to buy some of our debt? No, thanks. They've been dumping it. Why? Because if you're threatening them with war, you go to war, do you really think they're going to pay that debt? We got interest expenditures of $1 trillion when they owned 10%. So that means $100 billion goes to them so they can buy more missiles to shoot us? Not going to happen. So they've been moving to gold because they can't even take euro. So it's not de-dollarization. It's basically going neutral on this because they can't trust Europe and they can't trust the United States.
Mm-hmm. Marty, I want to go back to this idea of Trump's kind of change in tone towards Putin. Do you think that this is based upon influence from the neocons? And is it possible that the neocons and Trump and NATO are really underestimating the Russian capabilities, especially considering the restraint that Putin has shown in responding to some of the attacks on Russia by Ukraine and, in a proxy way by NATO?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, you even had Boris Johnson made the front pages of the Norwegian press. He came out and said Britain is in a proxy war with Russia. I mean, this is they're not hiding this. Mm-hmm. All right. If I'm Putin, there's no way in hell I'm going to sign a peace deal. I mean, you have every country, preparing for war, getting their drafts in order. Our staff in Germany. So this is direct information. All right. So a friend was 60 years old was told to report to duty. 60 years old. I had another friend who was a member and invited there to the Vienna Peace Conference a couple months ago. And when he left, he called me. He says, this got nothing to do with peace anymore. Everybody's talking about preparing for war, constricting people, getting the drafts going. He was completely shocked. A peace conference really is for war. And I think Trump he has foolishly listened to some of these neocons, and that includes Rubio. All right. I'm disappointed that he suddenly came out and endorsed Lindsey Graham, who is basically one of the worst. He was maybe number 2 to John McCain, but he's dead now. So I guess he's now number 1. But yeah, they're just insane. You got the other neocon who was on the January 6th who hated Trump, Kinzinger. We can defeat Russia in 3 days. I mean, these people act as if we can destroy Russia and they don't even get to push the button. I mean, come on. I really just, they said the same thing about Iraq, we'll be able to do this in a week. Then we're going to move directly to Tehran. And there were 7 countries they were going to take. Sorry, you got bogged down, didn't you? They've never won a single war yet. Korea, Vietnam, go down the list. Every war that these neocons have instigated. Afghanistan. What have they ever won? They're professional losers. They're no better than like a government court-appointed lawyer for you to make sure the government keeps its 99% conviction rate. They're perpetual losers. That's it. That's what these neocons are. You got Robert McNamara's apology on YouTube for Vietnam before he died. I guess he wanted to clear his conscience and took us into Vietnam. He says, well, we were wrong. We thought Russia was involved. It was just a civil war. The Lusitania, the Germans sunk that. They were sending arms to Britain. U.S., they denied it. 1987 Archaeology magazine, they found it. U.S. comes out, be careful, there's arms in the hull. They fly about absolutely everything. Russiagate, you name it. They don't tell the truth about anything. You had, Operation Northwoods, which is on Wikipedia. They wanted to kill Americans to say Cuba did it to justify an invasion. Kennedy said no way. So then they took out Kennedy because he was also against Vietnam War. I published one of the things from the Kennedy files that came out. One of the CIA guys told his family that a group in the CIA took out Kennedy. He told his family in New Jersey, and he said he was afraid for his life. He was shot to death 2 or 3 weeks later. What can I say? These people are they're evil. They think, they're defending the country or whatever, but the bulk of the U.S. national debt is the cost of war. We're still paying interest on World War I. And Iraq ends up being $3 trillion. How much did we spend on Afghanistan? They never pay this off. Then you're paying interest on that. We got a deficit, so we got to raise taxes. These neocons only look at what they want, which is war. They don't look at the cost, the people that die on the battlefield, the kids that have to grow up without a parent, the national debt, long term. Sun Tzu said there is no government in history, and he's absolutely correct, that has ever profited from prolonged wars. Nobody. Athens had nothing but prolonged wars. They fell. Sparta, same thing. This is historical. I can't find a single possible, alternative to this. War is not profitable.
With all of those lessons from history, Marty, what is the point of continuous war then?
Look, I don't know. I had arguments with Bill Kristol back in the 90s. And he said if we took out Saddam Hussein, Assad out of Syria, and Gaddafi, we'd bring peace to the Middle East. I said, you're out of your mind. Why they always want war, it's hard to say. Maybe they can't sleep at night unless there's an enemy. Then General Wesley Clark went to the Pentagon after 9/11. He said the same thing I heard. He said, he was told they were going into Iraq. He asked, "Oh, you tied Saddam to this?" "No, we're just going in." And he was told that they intended to go into 7 other countries. You can look at his speech from 2007. It's on YouTube. You have the apology of Tony Blair. Well, we thought we were freeing the people from Saddam. We didn't realize we were, subjecting them to more sectarian violence. Yes, there were 3 dictators. However, because we drew the lines for these countries in carving up the Ottoman Empire, they don't see themselves as all Syrian or Iraqi, etc. They still see themselves as tribal. Sunni versus Shiite versus Kurd. They didn't assimilate. So once you took out the Saddam Hussein, what'd you get? You got ISIS. These dictators at least prevented these tribes from killing each other. All right. Once you remove that, just look at the Middle East, just a mess. And the same thing with Iran. I mean, it's you had Israel, targeting the senior people to take them out. It was regime change. Trump at least told them, no, don't take out the Ayatollah. They wanted to take him out too. This is the stupidity of these people. That's about 30% on average of these other countries, each are Shiite. You take out the head of their religion, regardless of how we agree with them. All right. That would be kind of like the Protestants assassinating the Pope. There's certain things when religion is not negotiable. You can have ethnic differences. That's like Ukraine. Then you have conquest. Like Alexander the Great, we're going to go conquer this country. But the troops shared in the spoils. He couldn't say, okay, we're going to go take this country. What are we going to get out? Oh, nothing. Yeah, you're on your own. They basically stopped them from going into India. They said, this is enough. I don't see the Middle East going into any kind of a long-term peace deal. Not going to happen. It's just, look at Ireland. It's still split between Protestants and Catholics. I said before, like I've been in Bavaria and they said, oh, tomorrow's a holiday. I said, what's the holiday? Oh, we won the war against the Protestants in Prussia. They still celebrate this stuff. So I think Trump is listening to the wrong people. If he thinks that, I think he has made a serious mistake in saying that he's treating this geopolitical as if it's a tariff issue. Whereas I'm going to put 100% on you. No, okay, fine. I'll do 200 on you. All right, we'll settle with 20. That's negotiation. Geopolitical, that doesn't work. You're telling Putin, you're going to sign this peace deal or else. Okay? You got Medvedev coming and telling him we should start World War III now.
And that's kind of the successor to Putin, right?
Probably. Look, I know, and a lot of people, oh, you're Putin supporter. They have no idea what the hell they're talking about. Putin, I know, is probably the smartest man at the table. He has put down so many red lines, and they cross each and every one of them. I know the military in Ukraine was told to go to the border. They thought they were just going to defend the border. Then MI6 told them to invade and go into the Kursk region. Maybe that will get them, and he'll attack anything in NATO. We can call him the aggressor. This is what they do. Don't give long-range missiles to them to shoot into it. That's going to be a red line. They do. So Zelensky tried to assassinate Putin. Why? Because what I'm saying is true. He is sitting on his hands. He understands what they're doing. They're trying to bait him into World War III so they can call him the aggressor. And so he doesn't respond emotionally. And that's why I think Zelensky tried to assassinate him, because they want somebody like Medvedev in there who will respond emotionally. You did this, I'm pushing the button. That's what they want.
So, Marty, I want to go back to this 50-day deadline here. Socrates is also kind of pointing out that September is a dramatic turning point in the game of war as well. So can you give us a little bit more about what you expect and what Socrates is projecting in there as well, and as a crisis point of sorts?
Well, what I find interesting is at the beginning of the year that computer targeted August and September geopolitically. I think what happens and why it always ends up right is that there is a pressure building here. And so, as I said, there's a, without NATO intervention, Ukraine will fall. The computer's even gone flatline on Ukraine, which I've never seen it do in any other country. So Trump ends up, to my surprise, with this 50-day bullshit. What do you really expect? Do you really expect Putin to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, fall to his knees, I'll kiss your ring, please don't do anything to me"? Is this what you really expect to happen? This is not a negotiation tactic. You saw Medvedev say that we should basically retaliate. And if I was on that side, I would have to agree with him. I would say basically I would tell the West, my response would be you have 31 days to have an election in Ukraine. Zelensky steps down and let the Ukrainian people decide their own fate. Mm-hmm. All I hear from Ukraine,
if there's any left.
Yeah, I mean, all I hear from them is the complaint, are we allowed to have peace without permission from Boris Johnson, Washington, and Macron? They're not in charge of their own country. What we're doing to them is an absolute disgrace. This is why Romania, they understood what was going on. They voted against the EU, and then they called it, "Oh, he's under investigation and he can't take the presidency." Why? Because NATO is building the biggest, air base in Romania to attack Russia. They don't want to be dragged into war. But, look, what I have heard from the West is one of the most derogatory statements I ever heard, really. What the hell? They were all communists anyhow. They don't give a shit. Mm-hmm. If they really cared about peace and all this other kind of nonsense, you had peace deals. You had the Minsk agreement. All right? Merkel came out and said, well, we never really intended to honor that. We were just buying time for Ukraine to build an army to attack Russia. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know what else you can say. I mean, this is not bullshit. This has all been documented. Mm-hmm. So the purpose of this 50-day, I don't know what Trump thinks. You know, there's no way Putin can agree to some sort of a peace deal. Can't happen. Mm-hmm. All right. I know that China is going to back Russia. Why? Because they know this is not a war with Ukraine. This is a war with NATO. Mm-hmm. Like I said, you have Boris Johnson coming out, we're in a proxy war with Russia. They know NATO is at war with them, mm-hmm. not Ukraine.
So if Congress maybe allows this, let's say, sledgehammer approach to happen against Russia economically, and specifically to be able to impose more sanctions on Russia and maybe, China, India as well, what effect does this have on the world economy? And does this also tie into the 2026 panic cycle that Socrates is also forecasting?
Well, the panic cycle for 26 is on war. Okay. The economic confidence model is showing we're in a steep recession / depression into 2028. These people have destroyed the world economy. When the Biden administration put in the sanctions on Russia, removing them from the SWIFT system, that's what created BRICS. All right. All these other countries, including India, simply stood up and said, wait a minute. If we don't do what you tell us to do, you will remove us. Screw you, basically. And that's what created BRICS. This is all geopolitical. It's not, oh, they did it because they think gold's going to go up. No, I'm sorry, they're not traders. They know the world is melting down. That's not the issue of making a few extra bucks on this trade or that trade. But so I don't see this as being very logical. I don't know who the hell Trump is listening to, but he's going to drag us into World War III. And personally, I didn't expect that, and I'm not sure he did. It's like I've said before. I was at Mar-a-Lago for dinner back in March of 2020 when he was president the first time, and that's when he said he wanted to pull the troops out of Afghanistan. But he said the reason was he was tired of sending letters to their parents that they died, forgotten country. And to quote him back then, he said, what difference are we going to make? They've been fighting over borders for 1,000 years. I spoke to RFK. I argued that he should join Trump. Why? Because he was also anti-war. Even had a conversation with him, and he said, how would you end the war? So I knew where they were. To see this 50-day bullshit, I have to think that Trump thinks he's negotiating, and he's not. And maybe the neocons have gotten a hold of him. I can tell you, they used Bibi to get in. I grew up in South Jersey, so I was very familiar with the Philadelphia area. Bibi was there in Philadelphia. He went to school in Philadelphia. And he used to hang out with Bill Kristol's family. All right. It was Bill Kristol's father, Irving, who started the neocon movement. All right. So I knew from back then where, Bibi went to school. He is a neocon. All right. So maybe Trump got rid of Victoria Nuland and the rest of them, but Bolton, and they used Bibi to get into him, thinking, oh, well, he's the head of state. No, he's just one of them. All right? Same bullshit. And it's, so he got them, I think, to attack Iran. And they were hoping, maybe Russia or China would come in and then get that going. But that way, that didn't happen. All they've been doing is trying to deliberately create World War III. And they will succeed. I mean, our computers, I've tried to defeat it many, many times. I figure maybe the more I talk about it, maybe people will listen and will stop. It's not going to happen. So it's this latest 50-day nonsense has come right in on target. I expect the tensions to start to rise by next week. As I said, the only thing that I would do would be to drop the leaflets, give Ukrainians 2 weeks to get out of Kiev, and then I would nuke it. Maybe then the world will look at it and say, wait a minute, this is serious. NATO probably would then say, well, if you're going to nuke that, we're going to nuke Moscow. And I would have to then say, okay, fine, every European capital is targeted. If Trump sticks his nose in, I'd have to say, okay, fine, there goes Washington, New York, Chicago, and LA. What do you want out of this? This benefits nobody. I mean, we started the whole damn civil war in Ukraine to begin with. I mean, it was Victoria Nuland handing out sandwiches in my den. And you had John McCain on stage. This is about you. We're with you for peace, yeah? And then they stick in his interim government, unelected, and Victoria Nuland, even the tape got out, and she said, F the EU, I'm putting in whoever I want. And then instructed them to start the civil war with the Donbass. I mean, just look at the timeline. I mean, it's crazy. Then they even said, they knew Russian troops were on the border. And they sent Camilla to the Munich conference and handed her 2 cards. I mean, she's too stupid to understand what the hell she's even reading. Oh, Ukraine should join NATO. Really? All right. Oh, that's what you want me to say? Oh, okay, fine. They're right on the border right then and there. Maybe that will make them come across. I mean, I just know some of these people. They're very myopic. All they look at is war. I can't explain it other than I think that they cannot sleep at night without an enemy. Even if they took out Russia and China, who's next? What are you going to do then? I mean, look, ancient Athens was also divided left and right. You had the politicians wanted peace. No, we want war. They lost. All right, their neocons took them right into the Peloponnesian War, and Athens was destroyed. The computer says Europe's going, down. That's it. They're not going to win this one. U.S., we're not going to win this one again. And the financial capital of the world will move to China after 2032. We're getting too polarized in the West. And when that happens, I mean, just read the history of Athens. You see the same exact thing. The city was highly polarized, left versus right. That was it. You know, you can't unify, you go down.
Marty, mentioning that the financial center and basically all capital is going to move to China. I saw a story this morning about China imposing capital gains on all of the profits that Chinese citizens have made from investing in the US. Obviously, I've not been able to confirm this. I looked this morning before we started speaking here. But if this is true, is this, another sign of capital movement before troops?
Yeah, they're trying to get people to bring the money back home. Again, you go to war, the U.S. could freeze that. Just look at what they did to Russians. Oh, you were a friend of Putin's. Froze their accounts. No evidence that it had anything to do with the war, whatever. Putin, well, I'm freezing your account. Czechoslovakia actually stood up, or Czech Republic actually stood up and said that they were going to confiscate all assets owned by Russians. I mean, this is not, freedom, democracy, capitalism. When you start getting into this bullshit, Switzerland has surrendered its independence. It was neutral for World War I and II. So was Sweden. Sweden joined NATO. Forget being neutral. Now they're a target. Switzerland confiscated over $8 billion of Russian accounts just because they were Russian. Forget it. They're no longer neutral. The neocons have succeeded in basically undermining virtually every country. And well, I said, just like Robert McNamara, oh, we were wrong. Sorry, we thought Russia was involved. They haven't won a single war yet. And as I've said before, debt is the real Achilles heel. Countries default when you can't sell the new debt to pay off the old, when you're in these Ponzi schemes. That's what the Genius Act is about. All right.
Well, you wrote about that last week, that while the world has been distracted by the Epstein debacle, that legislators introduced the Genius Act that would permit the U.S. government to regulate stablecoins. So what does that mean for the U.S. and especially for the value of or the demand of bonds?
Well, when you're threatening war to China, which owns 10%, and they've been dumping, all right, how do you wage war if you can't sell the debt? All right, so in 1863, they faced the same problem with the Civil War. So it's on my site, you can see what they look like. They passed the National Banking Act. So banks were supposed to buy the U.S. government bonds. And to keep liquidity, they allowed them to issue currency backed by those bonds. So it's this the same thing as the stable coins. All right, issue the stable coins backed by U.S. Treasury. So now you've found a new buyer for the debt. Without a buyer, this comes crashing down. This is how countries collapse. I've said this many times. If you can't sell the new debt, that's it. You can't pay off the old. Default. Hello, the red bells go off, right? So that's what the Genius Act is about. They know they have problems. It was even bipartisan.
But
nothing's bipartisan unless it's economically beneficial to both sides.
Mm-hmm. But, I think a part of the Genius Act that we need to kind of go over and understand is also that it does not include a ban, as I understand it, on CBDCs in the US. Is that correct?
Correct. But the Fed really can't do that, because if the Fed issued the currency and then to look at your account, it would take a search warrant. So it's the COVID model. All right. The First Amendment says the government shall not restrict free speech. So they call YouTube and say, hey, cancel him. We don't like what he says. That's fine. Okay. Government didn't do it. They did it. I handed you the gun and told you who to shoot, but I didn't shoot him. That's basically the way they play it. So it's unlikely the government is going to do a CBDC. But allowing all these banks to create these stable coins backed by Treasury, that's better yet. Okay, so they can issue as much debt as they want. The banks will have to buy it. The banks can stick it in these stable coins, which is exactly how they funded the Civil War in 1863. Same thing all over again. History does repeat, mainly because when you have the same problem, you come up with a similar solution. As you know, I've been called into virtually every financial currency crisis since 1973. It's the same thing all over again. G5, 87 crash. I warned them, we're going to lower the dollar by 40% so we can sell more widgets. I said, you realize you do this and you're going to basically reduce the value of domestic assets, stocks, real estate, etc. They're going to sell. Why would they sell? Oh, because they're going to lose money, you idiot. They have done this constantly. 97, you had Robert Rubin, same shit. Trying to talk the dollar down. I wrote him a letter. I said, look, this is what they did in 87. I was called in on that one. Don't do it. That was the Asian currency crisis. All right. I've seen it. So it's always the same thing. They think they came up with this new idea. And I've concluded that, you can, your parent may tell you, don't stick your finger in the flame of the candle. You do. It hurt. Now, personally, not to do that again. All right. Government doesn't have that because they keep changing who's in power. So you get the next administration. Oh, this is a good idea. Nobody ever asks, has this been tried before? Did it work? Just look at these endless wars. They've lost every one.
Well, going back to this debt idea, Marty, you wrote a recent report that said the 30-year bond must close above 12,840 for year end to survive. Currently, they're in the 113 level. So what does war and the Stablecoin Act mean for the value of those bonds?
They'd have to buy an awful lot of them to back those stable coins. But the Federal Reserve can only set the short-term rate. They can't set the long-term. That's what quantitative easing was about. They went in to buy the 30-year bonds to try to reduce the supply. Implicitly, that would theoretically lower the long-term interest rates, the real mortgages, etc. All right. So the long bond basically reflects the confidence in the government. You go into war, you don't want to buy bonds of any government because a lot more bonds are going to come out. And the question is, who survives? You can buy Confederate bonds on eBay, no problem. You can buy plenty of European bonds from 1931, no problem, on eBay. I mean, they default. New government comes in. Oh, well, we're not going to pay the debts of the old one. We did the same thing in the Revolution. The Constitution said they would honor the debts of the Continental Congress. They never did. All right. So you can buy plenty of continental currency also on eBay. They never redeemed it. All right. There is no incident of basically the government paying off the debt of the old one, other than curiously, the only thing that really did happen along those lines is when the Mongols conquered China. They honored the previous currency that was in circulation. Very strange, but that's the only exception I could find. All the paper currency that was out there from the previous government, they honored it. It's just fascinating to look at the monetary history, but when you study it, you see the same shit all over again. Athens goes in the war, it debases its currency, and Sparta cut off its silver mines in 413 AD. By 407, they're melting down all the gold statues to make coins. This is pretty standard throughout history.
Well, Marty, to that point, looking at history as a guide, in the 70s, we saw 3 waves of inflation, and it seems like we're kind of at the trough of the second. So obviously there's many, many different forces at play today, but is it possible that we see another acceleration in inflation coming again that is, going to be blamed upon more conflict or, any of these external factors that can be pointed at as the boogeyman?
Yeah, what you have to understand about inflation is that there are several different types. The 70s was a what I call a cost push inflation. In other words, OPEC raised the price of oil, so that had to filter through the entire economy. Cost of production, driving to school, whatever, to work. I may have been very young back then, but I couldn't even, your gasoline was being rationed, $2. And every other day it was your license plates were odd or even when you could buy. I had to go buy a Ford Pinto station wagon because I couldn't get to work. 4-cylinder and it would last at least 2 days. So it changes things. That was a different type of inflation. So that created what was ended up people calling stagflation. So the cost of things was rising because oil was integral to all plastics as well. And so your costs were rising. No level of raising interest rates is going to stop that. And so as that was rising, it was shifting the economy around, so the economic growth went below that of the inflation rate. So that was different. Then you have sometimes inflation more that happened towards the end of the cycle in the late 70s, where people think there's a shortage and they were hoarding toilet paper back then too. So you have like an excessive demand type inflation. rather than cost push. Then you can have currency inflation. In 85, when the British pound fell to 103, all the Americans were there. They were buying real estate. The Brits thought we were crazy. Oh, you're buying the high. No, all right. The British pound fell from $2.40 to $1.03. It was like a sale at Harrods. I even went into British Airways and I asked how many tickets could I buy on the Concorde. They looked at me like I was what? Like, are you a drug dealer or something? I said, how many would you sell me? They came out, 25. That's maximum. I'll take them. It was fine. The Concorde was costing like $1,000. Before that, it was like, $3,000. And the Concorde was not doing well before because the British pound fell. All right. The first plane I got on, completely full, when it's all Americans saying, hey, isn't this the greatest deal?
Right.
So people respond based upon their currency. The same thing happened with Ferraris. I had bought a Ferrari in London. I think it was a 308 for like 50 grand. It was, or I think it was about 30 grand it cost me. And it was about a $50,000 or $60,000 car at the time in the US. I drove it around in London for 2 years, sold it, and made money. Why? Because the Italians could no longer afford to sell a Ferrari at that price when the pound fell to par. So they doubled the price, but then the pound went back to $1.90. So now all of a sudden, that's what made people buying Ferraris. They thought, oh, Ferrari's a good investment. No, it was just a currency. Sorry.
I was going to say your Ferrari ended up being an FX trade.
Yeah, they all were. I bought German cars during the 70s. What gave them this reputation of being good, solid, and held their value? It was because the Germans priced them in Deutschmark. So as the dollar went down, the German car, I could drive it around for 2 years and get my money back. We got called in actually by Toyota, and I restructured them and said, okay, fine, this is how you work it. They wanted to beat the Germans. You sell cars into the United States, but you price them in dollars. You take the currency risk back to Tokyo and manage it. That's Japanese then took out the Germans. They became very, very popular cars. I got called then into Mercedes. Hey, would you do for us what you did for them? I mean, the takeover boom of the 80s, it was all currency. I knew, I did most of those deals. I knew Alan Bond made so much money, created Bond University in Australia. People didn't know what was going on. He bought Courage Pubs. We'd run it through the model and say, okay, fine. We'd borrow in Swiss francs because the Swiss franc will go down against the asset denominated in pounds. We're making 30, 40% on the currency. People didn't understand it. Oh, he's paying too much. Really? That was the takeover boom. People didn't understand the 80s, and it was all currency moves. The same thing, the dollar went, to record highs. That pound had gone to par. And, basically by 1989, the pound's back at $1.90. You made a shitload of money if you understood the currencies.
So going back to my question, Marty, you mentioned these couple different sources or types of inflation. What do you see going forward for the West here of the type of inflation that is going to be affecting us?
We'll get into cost push because what will happen is you're going to get shortages. And as you get shortages, be more like the 70s. So we're looking at the type of inflation would be at least initially stagflation. And what they also leave out of the official inflation statistics are taxes. They never considered the cost of government as a part of your cost of living. So when you start raising taxes dramatically, that lowers your standard of living and causes basically stagflation. That's the big problem in Europe. They keep taxes very high, regulations very high. Germany is so afraid of inflation that it oppresses their people. And you can Google it and you'll see what's the average net worth of a German citizen. It's less than that of an Italian. The taxes are very, very significant. So I think they're still booming here in Florida. I still get 2 or 3 phone calls a week. Jay, you want to sell your house? I don't think you get that in Chicago.
But that doesn't apply to all of Florida, correct?
You still have a lot of people coming into Florida. I wish they would just go to the East Coast, please. But look, we have no income tax, balanced budget. It shows it can be done. But I don't see stores really in trouble here. Whereas New York, you saw a lot of stores that went out with COVID. Chains went down. A lot of them, it's varied. I mean, but you have a great migration still underway in the United States from the blue states to the red. California's losing a lot, same as New Jersey, New York, Connecticut. And you get this crazy guy running in New York. If he won, Wall Street is they still call it Wall Street, but a lot of the most profitable centers have been moved to Florida. Goldman Sachs moved his most profitable division down here. A senior exec VP of one of the banks in New York, major banks, called me. He says, "Hey, you want to go to dinner?" I thought he was just down here visiting. Went to dinner, and I said, "So how long are you here for?" "I moved here." I said, "Oh, really?" They're all getting out. It's I think by another 3 to 4 years max, Wall Street will be basically broke over time. Taxes are too high. The more people that leave, the more they raise taxes. The more they raise taxes, the more people leave.
Marty, we've talked a lot about interest rates and about the Fed today. How do you see the pressure basically, or is this pressure being applied on Jay Powell now that we saw the kind of referral of him to the Department of Justice here as a review of the $2.5 billion renovation to the Federal Reserve building? Does this start to make Powell, or do you think that this is an attempt to make Powell not want to complete his term by applying this type of pressure to him?
Pretty much. I mean, this is very disappointing. I mean, look, Trump is a borrower. He's not a lender. So he always wants the lowest interest rates. And what he does not understand, you lower the interest rates and what happens? All right. You're wiping out the elderly that were told, "Oh, save, you can live off your savings," all this bullshit. First of all, interest rates are not going to decline in time of war. Period. Powell is looking at this objectively, and for them to do this to Powell now, at the same time when you're talking about this 50-day deadline bullshit, things start heating up here in August. Powell's not wrong. I got to, call the shots as it is. I mean, it's not. This isn't political to me. It's simple, math. I mean, interest rates rise during war. Why? Because you're selling more debt. Period. Mm-hmm. It's greater risk. So trying to, you can read 1951. During World War II, they ordered the Federal Reserve, and it did comply to be patriotic, that if interest rates rose above a certain factor, they had to buy the debt. So it's kind of a quantitative easing by White House direction. After World War II, and starting with the Korean War, the White House instructed the Fed to do it again. The Fed refused. So it made the front pages of the newspaper. It was basically Federal Reserve refuses to follow the White House. It was a public coup, basically. So that's where we're at. If Trump is going to try and dictate lower interest rates to the Fed in time of war, you better be prepared to buy your own stuff, because like Japan does. I wouldn't buy it.
So Marty, in kind of wrapping up here, what are you most focused on, let's say, for the short term here, for the next quarter? Is it this basically the escalation going into this 50-day deadline imposed by Trump?
Yeah, I mean, look, you're starting to see even silver move up a bit. Gold starting to look, and both look like they want to make new highs. They respond to geopolitical issues. And that's why they're starting to test the resistance above, because you're looking at the geopolitical stuff at this stage. So to me, this 50-day, Trump may not have intended it to be the start of a conflict, but I'm sorry, his tactics of negotiation may work in tariffs, but not geopolitically.
Well, Marty, we'll keep an eye on this stuff, and always appreciate you walking us through how you and Socrates really see these issues and how they're playing out here.
Well, good luck. It's going to be interesting for the next, 6 to 8 weeks, I would say. I just don't see what you expect out of this 50-day nonsense. Putin cannot possibly say, "Oh, gee, I'm terribly sorry," bend the knee. I mean, he does that, he's going to be replaced. Maybe that's their objective, replace him, and then he gets somebody who's going to be warmonger. I don't think Trump understands that, and he's just listening to the wrong people. I don't see him as a warmonger, but
seems like his actions are showing something a little bit different than what he promised in the campaign.
Yes, as they say, the road to heaven, isn't necessarily paved with good intentions, but
isn't that the road to hell?
It might be the other way too. Yeah, I just never see it work out the way that they think. But
well, time will tell, as usual, unfortunately. Marty, I always appreciate your time. Thank you so much for your discussion today. Of course, all of your stuff is available at armstrongeconomics.com and on X as well, at Strong Economics. Marty, thanks so much for your time today.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and we have a front row seat, I think.
We'll make sure we get an update from you as this progresses.
Should be interesting.
This podcast is for general informational purposes only. Nothing on this podcast should be taken as investment advice. Guests on this show are not compensated for their appearance. Listeners are urged to educate themselves and make their own decisions. Do not base any investment decisions on the information contained. To view our full disclaimer, please visit our website.